I lost my family simply because I helped a homeless stranger. 2 years later. When his face flashed across the national news, the truth hit me hard. The man I saved had not just been abandoned. He had been systematically erased by his own kin, and I, without ever realizing it, had become the single living witness to a crime that was supposed to stay buried forever. My name is Mia Kane, and at 33 years old, I had officially become a ghost in my own life. I lived in a rusted-out industrial city in Ohio, where the sky seemed permanently painted a shade of bruised purple, and the air always smelled faintly of burning rubber and wet asphalt. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die quietly in the corner of a dive bar, and where people like me worked until our spines felt like they were fusing together just to keep the lights on. I worked 3 jobs. Not 1, not 2, but 3. I was a barista from 5 in the morning until noon, a stock clerk at a grocery store from 1 until 5, and then I took shifts at a 24-hour diner whenever they needed an extra body to wipe down sticky tables. You might think that working 70 hours a week would mean I had a savings account or at least a car that did not sound like it was dying of tuberculosis every time I turned the key. You would be wrong. My bank account was a revolving door. The money came in, and within seconds, it was gone. Half of it went to my landlord, a man who thought fixing a leaking pipe was an optional luxury. The other half, the part that actually hurt to let go of, went south. Specifically, it went to a small mountain town where my parents and my younger brother lived in a house that I was paying to maintain. My phone buzzed against the countertop of the diner. It was 7 in the evening, and I was stealing 3 minutes to inhale a stale bagel before the dinner rush hit. I looked at the screen. Mom. My stomach tightened, a reflex I had developed over years of conditioning. It was never a casual chat. It was never just to ask how I was doing or if I was happy. It was always about the math. I slid the answer button across the screen. Hello. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mia, did you send the transfer yet? Her voice was sharp, cutting through the noise of the coffee grinder behind me. Your father is at the pharmacy right now, and the card was declined. It was embarrassing. Mia, extremely embarrassing. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cool tile of the back wall. I sent $300 on Tuesday. Mom, that was everything I had left after rent. 300? Her scoff was audible. That does not even cover the heating bill and your brother's car insurance. You know he needs the car to look for work. How do you expect him to go to interviews if he cannot drive? My brother had been looking for work for 4 years. In that time, he had managed to find plenty of time to play video games and go fishing with his friends. But he had somehow never managed to find a single employer worthy of his time. He was 28 years old, perfectly healthy, and entirely subsidized by my exhaustion. I am working an extra shift tonight, I said, the fatigue seeping into my bones. I can try to send another $50 tomorrow, but that is it. I have to buy groceries. Mom, I have not been to the store in 2 weeks. There was a pause on the other end, but it was not filled with sympathy. It was the silence of calculation. Well, maybe if you managed your money better, you would not be in this position, she said, her tone dripping with that specific brand of maternal disappointment that stings worse than a slap. Just send what you can, and hurry up. Your father is waiting. The line went dead. No goodbye, no thank you. Just the demand and the disconnect. I stared at the phone, feeling that familiar hollow ache in my chest. I was not a daughter to them. I was a utility. I was like the electricity or the water supply. They only noticed me when I stopped working. I pocketed the phone, wiped the crumbs from my mouth, and went back out to smile at strangers who tipped me in quarters. The shift ended at midnight. It had been raining since 4 in the afternoon, a cold, relentless Ohio rain that soaked through everything. I did not have my car that night because the starter had finally given up the ghost 2 days prior. So I was at the mercy of the public transit system. The buses in this city ran on a schedule that could best be described as theoretical. I pulled my coat tighter around myself, the fabric thin and useless against the wind cutting down 4th Street. I needed to catch the 12:15 bus. If I missed it, the next one was not until 1 in the morning, and I had to be up at 4:30 for the coffee shop. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead, and my shoes were already soaking wet. I kept my head down, walking fast, counting the cracks in the sidewalk to keep my mind off the fact that I had exactly $12 in my checking account until Friday. That was when I saw him. The bus stop was little more than a metal pole and a shattered glass enclosure that offered zero protection from the elements. Huddled on the bench, curled into a ball so tight he looked like a discarded pile of laundry, was a man. He was not just sleeping, he was shaking. It was a violent, rhythmic shivering that rattled the bench. He wore a coat that was more holes than fabric, and his feet were wrapped in plastic bags that were shredded at the heels. I slowed down. My survival instinct, honed by years of living in a rough neighborhood, told me to keep walking. Keep your head down. Mia, do not make eye contact. You cannot afford trouble. You cannot afford to be late. If I stopped, I would miss the bus. If I missed the bus, I would lose an hour of sleep. If I lost that sleep, I would be sluggish at the coffee shop. If I was sluggish, I might mess up an order. I was one mistake away from losing a shift. And one lost shift meant my brother did not get his gas money, which meant my mother would scream at me. I walked past him. I actually took 3 steps past the bench. But then I heard a sound. It was a low, guttural whimper, like a wounded animal that had given up on fighting. I stopped. The rain was mashing my hair against my face. I looked back. The street lamp flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow light on the man. He looked old. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his lips were a terrifying shade of blue. He was not drunk. I knew the look of a drunk slump. This was hypothermia. This was a man freezing to death in the middle of a city that was too busy drowning in its own misery to notice him. I looked at my watch. 12:14. The bus would be turning the corner any second. I cursed under my breath. I cursed the rain. I cursed my parents. And I cursed my own inability to just look away. "Hey," I called out, stepping back toward the bench. "Sir?" He did not move. The shaking was getting worse. I reached out and touched his shoulder. It felt like touching a bag of ice. He was soaked through to the bone. "Sir, you cannot stay here," I said, my voice rising over the sound of the rain. "You are freezing." He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were milky and unfocused, sliding over my face without really seeing me. He tried to speak, but his jaw was chattering so hard that no words came out. He just looked at me with a confusion that broke my heart. He looked like a child trapped in an old man's body, scared and completely alone. The bus turned the corner. I saw the headlights sweeping through the rain. I had a choice. I could get on that bus, go home to my warm, tiny apartment, and sleep, or I could deal with this. The bus driver saw me. He slowed down, the air brakes hissing. The doors folded open with a clatter. The driver, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, looked at me and then looked at the heap of rags on the bench. He waited. I waved him on. "Go," I yelled over the rain. "Just go." The driver shrugged. The doors slammed shut, and the bus roared away, taking my easy night with it. I watched the taillights fade into the mist and felt a pit in my stomach. "Okay, Mia, okay, you did the stupid thing. Now finish it." I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. While I waited for the operator, I took off my coat. It was not much. A cheap wool blend I had bought at a thrift store, but it was dry on the inside. I wrapped it around the old man's shoulders. He flinched at the touch, then leaned into the warmth, his head falling against my arm. The ambulance took 20 minutes. In that time, I learned that he had no name. I asked him who he was, where he lived, if there was anyone I could call. He just stared at the wet pavement and mumbled things that made no sense. He spoke of numbers. He spoke of a gate that was locked. He whispered the word blue over and over again. When the paramedics finally arrived, they were professional but dismissive. They saw another homeless John Doe, another drain on the county resources. They loaded him onto the stretcher with practiced indifference. "Are you family?" one of them asked, pausing with his hand on the back door of the ambulance. "No," I said, shivering in just my uniform shirt. "I just found him." "We are taking him to St. Jude's," he said. "You can go home, lady. We will handle it." I should have gone home. I really should have. But the image of his blue lips and that terrified, vacant stare kept clawing at me. If I left him, he would be treated, discharged, and dumped back on the street by morning. That was how the system worked. I knew it. Everyone knew it. I cannot explain why, but I climbed into the back of the ambulance before I could talk myself out of it. "I am coming with him," I said. The ride was a blur of lights and static radio chatter. At the hospital, chaos reigned. It was a Friday night in a poor city, which meant the waiting room was a war zone of overdoses, bar fights, and flu cases. Because I was with him, the intake nurse assumed I was his granddaughter. I did not correct her immediately because it seemed to make them move faster. They got him into a bed, warmed him up, and pumped fluids into his veins. I sat in a plastic chair in the hallway, dripping wet, while a doctor finally came over to talk to me. "He has no identification," the doctor said, looking at a clipboard. No wallet, no phone, nothing in his pockets but some lint and a single, rusted washer. "He is severely malnourished and dehydrated, but the hypothermia was caught just in time. Another hour out there and his heart would have stopped." "What about his mind?" I asked. He did not know who he was. "Transient global amnesia, or maybe onset dementia brought on by trauma and exposure," the doctor said with a shrug. "It happens. He is confused. He does not know his name or what year it is. He thinks it is 1995. I looked through the open curtain. The old man was sleeping now, his face pale against the white pillow. He looked fragile, like a dried leaf that would crumble if you held it too tight. "We cannot keep him here," the doctor continued, his voice lowering. "Once he is stable, we have to discharge him. We need the bed. Social services is backed up for weeks. He will likely go to the shelter on 5th Street. The shelter on 5th Street was notorious. It was dangerous, dirty, and barely habitable. Sending a confused old man there was a death sentence. I looked at the doctor, then at the old man. I thought about my bank account. I thought about the $50 I had promised my mother. "Does he need medicine?" I asked. "Antibiotics for a chest infection and some vitamins," the doctor said. "We can write a script, but the hospital pharmacy charges for discharge meds if he has no insurance." "How much?" I asked. "Probably around $40. $40. That was my groceries for the week. That was the money for my brother's imaginary job hunt." I reached into my bag and pulled out my debit card. My hand was shaking, just a little. "Do it," I said. "I will pay for it." I walked over to the pharmacy counter and swiped the card. I watched the numbers on the little screen confirm the transaction. Approved. I had practically nothing left. I went back to the room and sat by the bed. The old man stirred. His eyes opened, and for a second, there was a flash of clarity before the fog rolled back in. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his hand reached out from under the thin blanket. His fingers were rough, calloused, and stained with dirt. He grasped my hand with a surprising amount of strength. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was like grinding gravel. I squeezed his hand back. "Do not worry," I said softly. "I am not going to leave you here." I did not know it then, but that $40 was the most expensive purchase of my life. I had just bought a one-way ticket to a war with my own blood, and the man holding my hand was the weapon that would tear my world apart. But in that moment, in the sterile hum of the hospital room, all I saw was a human being who had been thrown away, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I was the only person left to pick him up. The decision to bring him home was not made with a grand sense of heroism. It was made with the desperate, frantic energy of someone trying to stop a leak in a boat. The hospital discharge papers were signed. The nurse gave me a pitying look that made my skin crawl, and suddenly, I was standing on the sidewalk at 2 a.m. with a man whose entire life was currently contained in a plastic hospital bag. I called a cab. It cost me $22 to get us back to my apartment. I watched the meter tick up with a sense of nausea, but I could not make him walk the 3 miles in the rain. When we arrived, I had to guide him up the 3 flights of stairs. My building did not have an elevator, and the hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. He moved slowly, placing his feet with excessive caution, his hand gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. My apartment was a shoebox. It was basically one room with a kitchenette in the corner and a bathroom that was barely wide enough to turn around in. I had a mattress on the floor and a small, lumpy sofa I had salvaged from the curb a year ago. "Here," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. "It is not much, but it is warm." He stood in the center of the room, looking around. Most people would have looked at the peeling paint or the water stains on the ceiling with judgment. He looked at them with a strange sense of reverence, as if he were entering a cathedral. He did not sit until I gestured for him to do so. "I do not have a guest room," I said, feeling a sudden flush of embarrassment, "but the sofa pulls out. It is broken on one side, but if you prop it up with these books, it holds." I set it up for him. I found an old sleeping bag and a pillow that had lost most of its fluff. He watched me silently. When I was done, he sat down, folded his hands in his lap, and looked at me. "Thank you, Miss," he said. His voice was clearer than it had been at the hospital, though still weak. "My name is Mia," I told him. "Do you know yours yet?" He frowned, looking down at his hands. He rubbed his thumb over the spot on his ring finger where a wedding band must have sat for decades. The skin there was indented and paler than the rest. "Wallace," he murmured. "I think Wallace." It might have been a first name, a last name, or just a random word his firing synapses had latched onto, but it suited him. He looked like a Mr. Wallace. "Okay," I said. "Mr. Wallace it is. Get some sleep." That first week was a lesson in anxiety I had never prepared for. I had to go to work. I had no choice. Every time I locked the door behind me to leave for the coffee shop at 4:30 in the morning, I was terrified. What if he turned on the gas stove and forgot to light it? What if he walked out the door and wandered into traffic? What if he died right there on my secondhand sofa? I spent my shifts in a state of high-functioning panic. I made lattes and stocked shelves with my heart in my throat. I called my landline on my breaks just to hear if someone would pick up, but I had told him not to answer the phone. So the ringing just echoed into the void. But every day, when I came home, he was there. He was not just there. He was existing in a way that baffled me. On the 3rd day, I came home to find him standing by the window. He had found a broom. I did not even know I owned a broom, and he had swept the entire apartment. The small pile of dust was collected perfectly in the center of the room. Waiting for a dustpan I did not have. He had used a piece of stiff cardboard instead. But it was the small things that caught my attention. It was the way he folded the sleeping bag every morning. He did not just wad it up, he smoothed it out, aligned the corners with geometric precision, and rolled it so tight it looked like a military issuance. When he drank the cheap instant coffee I made, he held the chipped mug with a pinky slightly extended, not in an affectation of wealth, but with a deep-seated muscle memory of table manners. He was quiet, but he was not vacant. He watched everything. One evening, I came home dead on my feet. I had pulled a double shift at the grocery store because a coworker called in sick. My back was screaming, and I had a headache that felt like a drill behind my eyes. I walked in, expecting to have to figure out dinner from the meager contents of my pantry. Instead, the apartment smelled savory. Mr. Wallace was standing at the stove. He was wearing an old apron I used for cleaning. He was stirring a pot. "I found some potatoes," he said, not turning around, "and an onion. The carrots were soft, but I cut around the bad parts." I walked over and looked into the pot. It was a simple soup, mostly broth and vegetables, but he had toasted some stale bread in the oven to go with it. I did not know if I should be worried about him using the knife or grateful. I chose grateful. We sat at the small, wobbly table I usually used as a desk. We ate in silence. It was the best soup I had tasted in years. Not because the ingredients were expensive. They were practically garbage. But because someone had made it for me. For the first time in my adult life, I came home and I was not alone. The emptiness of the apartment, The crushing silence that usually greeted me was gone. "You cook well," I said. He looked pleased, a small, tentative smile touching the corners of his mouth. "I remember. Chopping," he said softly. "I remember a big kitchen, but I do not remember who I was cooking for." "Maybe you were a chef," I suggested. He looked at his hands again. "No," he said firmly, "not a chef. But I liked things to be in order." As the days turned into 2 weeks, the dynamic shifted. Mr. Wallace was no longer a guest. He was a roommate. He insisted on doing things. He fixed the leak under the bathroom sink using a rubber band and a piece of plastic piping he found in the alley. He organized my chaotic bookshelf by color and size. He even darned a hole in my work socks with a needle and thread he found in a drawer. The apartment felt different. It felt cared for. And strangely, I felt cared for. When I came home, the lights were on. There was hot water in the kettle. He would ask me about my day, and he would listen. He did not understand everything. He still forgot words. And sometimes he would get confused about whether it was morning or night. But he listened with an intensity that my parents never possessed. But warmth does not pay the bills. The reality of caring for another human being, especially one with health issues, crashed into my finances with the force of a freight train. The initial pharmacy bill was just the start. He needed better food than ramen noodles to regain his strength. He needed vitamins. He needed a warm coat because he refused to stay inside all day. He wanted to walk to the corner and back to build his stamina. I sat down with my notebook one Tuesday night. I did the math 3 times, hoping the numbers would change. They did not. My rent was due. The electric bill was overdue. And I had spent nearly $200 on Mr. Wallace's needs in the last fortnight. That $200 was supposed to go to Crestview Hills. It was supposed to go to my father's back pain medication and my brother's gas tank. I stared at the ledger. There was no way to make it work. I could not starve Mr. Wallace. I could not kick him out. And I could not magically manufacture money. I had to make the call. I waited until I knew my mother would be watching her evening soap opera. She was always in a slightly better mood then. I dialed the number. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Hello?" Her voice was distracted. "Hi." "Mom," I said. "Mia, did you send the money? We have been checking the account since yesterday." I took a deep breath. "Mom, listen, I cannot send the full amount this month." The silence on the other end was immediate and icy. The background noise of the television seemed to vanish. "Excuse me?" she said. Her voice dropped an octave. "What did you just say?" I had to lie. I could not tell them about Mr. Wallace. If I told them I was spending money on a homeless stranger while they suffered, they would unleash a torrent of guilt that I was not strong enough to withstand. My hours got cut. I lied. The voice came out shaky. "The diner. They are doing renovations. They closed the night shift for 2 weeks. I lost 10 shifts. Mom, I literally do not have the money." "Liar," she spat. I flinched, pulling the phone away from my ear. "I am not lying. Mom, I can send $100. That is it. I have to pay rent, or I will be evicted." $100? She laughed. A harsh barking sound. "What are we supposed to do with $100? Mia, your brother has an interview on Thursday. He needs a haircut. He needs gas. Your father needs his pills. Do you want him to be in pain? Is that it? You want your father to suffer while you... What? What are you doing with your money? Buying clothes? Going to bars?" "I am eating rice and beans." "Mom!" I shouted, my control slipping. "I am barely surviving here." "Do not yell at me," she screamed back. "After everything we did for you, we raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. And now, when we need a little help, you abandon us? You are selfish. Mia, you have always been selfish." I squeezed my eyes shut. Tears leaked out, hot and stinging. It was the same script, always the same script. I was the investment that was failing to yield returns. "I will send the 100, I whispered. "I am sorry. It is all I have." "Keep your damn money if it is such a burden," she yelled. But do not expect us to be here when you come crawling back. You do not care about family. You only care about yourself." She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear like a wasp. I lowered the phone and just sat there, staring at the wall. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. Was I selfish? Was I choosing a stranger over my own blood? I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned around. Mr. Wallace was standing there. He had heard. In a one-room apartment, there were no secrets. He looked at me with those pale, intelligent eyes. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask who was on the phone. He simply reached into his pocket. He pulled out the single, rusted metal washer he had been found with, the only possession he had in the world. He placed it gently on the table in front of me. "It is not money," he said, his voice rough, "but it is all I have. You can have it." I looked at the rusted piece of metal, and then I looked at him. My mother had just rejected my $100 because it was not enough. This man was offering me a piece of junk because it was everything. I burst into tears. I cried for the cruelty of my parents, for the exhaustion in my bones, and for the overwhelming, heartbreaking kindness of a man who did not even know his own last name. Mr. Wallace did not move away. He stood there, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, anchoring me to the ground while my world fractured a little more. I knew then that the lie I told my mother was the beginning of the end. They would not forgive this, but looking at the man standing in my kitchen, wearing my oversized wool sweater, I realized I did not want their forgiveness. I wanted to keep this strange, quiet peace we had built, even if it cost me everything else. The drive to my parents' house usually took 2 hours, but that Saturday morning, it felt like a drive to the gallows. I had borrowed a car from a coworker at the diner, a rusted sedan that smelled of wet dog and stale cigarettes, because I knew I could not have this conversation over the phone. My mother hanging up on me was one thing. The silence that followed for 3 days was another. It was a tactical silence, designed to let my guilt fester and rot until I crawled back with an apology and a check. But I did not have a check. I had a truthful explanation, and naively, I thought that if they looked me in the eye and saw how tired I was, if they heard the story of Mr. Wallace, they might understand. I thought there was still a shred of humanity left in the house where I grew up. I was wrong. I pulled into the driveway of the modest ranch-style house in the foothills. The grass was overgrown. My brother's car, a sporty model that cost more than my annual rent, was parked prominently in the center of the driveway, forcing me to park on the street. I walked up the path, clutching my purse like a shield. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a familiar rhythm of anxiety that I had associated with this front door since I was 6 years old. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled the same as always, lemon polish masking the scent of stagnation. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. They were in the living room. It was a tableau of aggressive leisure. My father was in his recliner, the television blaring a game show. My mother was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a catalog. My brother, Kyle, was sprawled on the floor, controller in hand, eyes glued to a video game. No one looked up. I stood in the entryway, the intruder in my own family home. "I am here," I said, my voice sounding small in the room. My mother slowly lowered the catalog. She looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses. Her expression was not one of welcome. It was the look a bank manager gives a client who has overdrawn their account. "Did you bring it?" she asked. "No hello, Mia. No, how was the drive? Just the demand." I walked further into the room and turned off the television. My father groaned, finally looking at me. His face was flushed. Likely from blood pressure he refused to manage with diet, but was happy to medicate with pills I paid for. "What are you doing?" he snapped. I was watching that. "We need to talk," I said, standing in front of the television, "and I need you to listen." Kyle snorted from the floor, not looking away from his game. "She is broke. Dad, she is going to give us a sob story about her rent again." I ignored him. I looked at my parents. I did not bring the money. I said clearly, "And I'm not going to be able to send the full amount next month either." My father sat up straight, the recliner creaking under his weight. Excuse me? I took a deep breath. I found someone, a man. He was dying at a bus stop near my apartment. He is old, homeless, and has no memory. I could not leave him there to freeze, so I brought him home. I am taking care of him until he gets better or remembers who he is. The room went silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. I watched their faces, waiting for a flicker of compassion. I waited for my mother to say, "Oh, that poor soul," or for my father to nod and say, "You did the right thing, kid." Instead, my father's face turned a deep, violent shade of red. "You did what?" he whispered. I took him in. I repeated, "He is sick. He needs food and medicine. That is where the money went. I paid for his antibiotics. I bought him a coat. I am buying extra groceries." My mother stood up. She looked at me with genuine horror, as if I had just confessed to murder. "You took a tramp into your apartment? A dirty, homeless stranger? He is a human being." "Mom," I said, my voice rising. "He was freezing to death." "And so you decided to let us starve?" my father roared, slamming his hand down on the armrest. "You decided that some piece of garbage from the street is more important than your own flesh and blood?" "I am not letting you starve," I argued, gesturing around the room. "You have a house. You have heat. Kyle is driving a new car. I am eating ramen noodles so Mr. Wallace can have soup." "Mr. Wallace?" Kyle laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "You named the stray? Jesus. Mia, you are pathetic. What are you trying to be? Mother Teresa? You cannot even afford to fix your shoes, and you are running a charity?" "Shut up, Kyle," I snapped. "At least I'm working. At least I'm trying to do something good." My mother walked over to me. She was a small woman, but in that moment, she loomed large with indignation. She poked a finger into my chest. "Do not you dare speak to your brother like that," she hissed. "He is going through a hard time. He is sensitive, and do not you dare stand there and talk to us about doing good. Do you know what is good? Mia? Honoring your parents. That is in the Bible. You owe us. We sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us? By throwing your money away on a stranger?" "He is not a stranger anymore," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "He helps me. He cleans. He cooks. He actually asks me how my day was. He is kind to me, which is more than I can say for any of you right now." The slap came fast. It was not hard, but it was shocking. My mother's hand connected with my cheek, a sharp sting that silenced the room. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "We gave you life." I held my cheek, staring at her. I felt something inside me break. It was the tether, the invisible cord that had kept me bound to their expectations for 33 years. It snapped, loud and clean. My father stood up and walked over. He towered over me. "Get rid of him," he said. His voice was low and cold. "What?" I asked. "You heard me? You go back to that apartment. You kick that bum out on the street where he belongs. And you send us the money you owe us by Monday morning." "I cannot do that," I said, shaking my head. "He has nowhere to go. He will die." "That is not our problem," my father said. "And if you are stupid enough to make it your problem, then you are no daughter of mine." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who I had spent my entire adult life trying to please. He was not looking at me with love. He was looking at me like an employee who had stolen from the cash register. "Is that the choice?" I asked quietly. "Him or you?" "It is not a choice." "Mia," my mother said, crossing her arms, "it is a duty. You choose family. Always." I looked at Kyle. He had paused his game and was watching with a smirk, enjoying the show. I looked at the comfortable furniture, the warmth of the house, the sheer abundance of things they had compared to the emptiness of my life. Then I thought of Mr. Wallace. I thought of him sweeping my floor with a piece of cardboard. I thought of him offering me his only possession, that rusted washer, because he saw I was sad. I thought of the way he said thank you every time I handed him a glass of water. He was a stranger with no memory, yet he had treated me with more dignity in 2 weeks than my family had in a decade. Then I choose him, I said. The air left the room. My father's jaw dropped. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Get out, my father spat. I turned to the door. I said, get out, he screamed, his voice cracking, and do not come back. Do not call us. Do not write. If you love that garbage so much, you can rot in the gutter with him. You are dead to us. Mia, do not expect a dime when we die. I opened the door. The cold mountain air hit my face, drying the tears on my cheeks. You never gave me a dime when you were alive, I said, looking back at them one last time. Why would I expect one when you are dead? I walked out. I heard my mother screaming my name as I walked down the path, a shrill, hysterical sound that echoed off the hills. I heard the door slam shut with a force that rattled the windows. I got into the rusted car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key into the ignition. I drove away. I drove down the winding mountain roads, putting mile after mile between me and the people who shared my DNA. I cried for the first hour. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I grieved for the parents I wished I had, and I grieved for the little girl who had tried so hard to be good enough for them. But as the mountains gave way to the flat, gray expanse of the highway, the tears stopped. A strange sensation settled over me. It was not happiness. It was not relief, exactly. It was lightness. The burden was gone. The monthly terror of the bank transfer was gone. The dread of the phone ringing was gone. I was poor. I was alone. I had a homeless man sleeping on my floor and 3 jobs that were slowly killing me. But for the first time in my life, I was free. I arrived back at my apartment late that night. The lights were off, but the small lamp by the sofa was on. Mr. Wallace was sitting there, a book in his hands. He looked up as I entered, concern etching his features. You were gone a long time. Mia, he said softly. I was worried. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down on the edge of the sofa. I looked at this man, this stranger who had cost me my family. I am okay. Mr. Wallace, I said, and for the first time that day, I was telling the truth. I am just really glad to be home. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I saved you some soup, he said. I realized then that family is not whose blood runs in your veins. It is who would save you soup when you are hungry. And as I sat there, eating the lukewarm broth in the dim light of my tiny apartment, I knew I had made the right choice. My past was gone, left behind in that house on the hill. My future was uncertain. But right here, right now, I had enough. 2 years is a long time to live in the gray area between survival and poverty. But strangely enough, it was the most peaceful time of my life. The apartment was still small. The paint was still peeling, and the radiator still clanged like a prisoner banging a tin cup against the bars. But the air inside was different. It was lighter. Mr. Wallace was no longer a guest. He was a fixture. He was my roommate, my friend, and in a way that I dared not say out loud, the father I had always wished for. His memory had not returned in a flood, as they often show in movies. It came back in droplets, tiny and disconnected. He remembered that he liked his toast cut into triangles. He remembered the smell of expensive leather. He remembered how to tie a Windsor knot, which he demonstrated on a frayed scarf one winter morning. But he did not remember his name, his address, or why he had been dying on a bench in the rain that night. We had a routine. I worked my 3 jobs. Though I had managed to swap the night shifts at the diner for a slightly better-paying gig at a warehouse on weekends, Mr. Wallace managed the house. He took his role seriously. He clipped coupons with the precision of a surgeon. He walked to the market and haggled over bruised peaches. He kept the apartment spotless. As for my biological family, the silence they had threatened turned out to be conditional. My father had sworn I was dead to them, but apparently, ghosts were still expected to have bank accounts. About 6 months after I left, the messages started. They were never apologies. They were never inquiries about my well-being. They were just demands disguised as emergencies. Kyle needs bail money, a misunderstanding. The roof is leaking. Send 500. Your mother is sick from stress. You did this. I never replied. I blocked the numbers, but they would use different phones. I read the messages, felt the familiar spike of cortisol, and then I deleted them. I had learned the hard lesson that their love was a currency I could not afford, and frankly, I no longer wanted to buy it. It was a Tuesday in November when the ground shifted beneath my feet again. It was my rare day off. The warehouse was closed for inventory, and the coffee shop was undergoing repairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea. Mr. Wallace was in the armchair by the window, a new edition we had found at a yard sale for $10, reading a discarded newspaper he had found on the bus. He liked to read the financial section. Even though he claimed not to understand it, he said the numbers felt calming, like a language he used to speak but had forgotten. I was scrolling through the news on my cracked tablet. It was a slow news day, a local election scandal, a weather report predicting snow, a feature on the best pumpkin pies in the county. I clicked on a section labeled National Mysteries. I do not know why. Boredom, perhaps? The headline was sensational, written in bold, black letters. The Vanishing Titan. 2 years later. Still no trace of Gideon Hartwell. I almost scrolled past it. Billionaires went missing all the time, usually on yachts or with mistresses. It had nothing to do with me. But then I saw the photograph. My breath hitched in my throat. I dropped the tablet on the table with a clatter. Mia? Mr. Wallace asked, looking up from his paper. Is everything all right? I could not speak. I stared at the screen. The man in the photo was younger. His hair was silver, not white, and cut in a sharp, expensive style. He was wearing a tuxedo, standing with a glass of champagne in one hand, looking at the camera with a gaze that was terrifyingly familiar. It was an arrogant look, a look of absolute command. But the eyes were the same, the slight droop of the left eyelid, the way his ears sat just a little too low on his head. I looked at the photo. Then I looked at Mr. Wallace. He was wearing a faded cardigan I had bought him for $4. He was holding a pair of reading glasses taped at the bridge. He looked soft, worn down by time and trauma. But it was him. There was no doubt in my mind. The structure of the face, the line of the jaw, the specific curve of the nose. It was him. Mr. Wallace? I whispered. He put down his paper. What is it, dear? You look like you have seen a ghost. I picked up the tablet, my hands trembling. I walked over to him. Look at this. He squinted at the screen. He looked at the man in the tuxedo. He stared at it for a long time. The silence in the room stretched out, thin and brittle. I watched his face for a flicker of recognition, a spark of memory. Instead, he frowned. He looks unhappy, Mr. Wallace said softly. You do not know him? I asked, my voice high and tight. Mr. Wallace shook his head. No, I do not think so, but he looks like a man who carries a heavy weight. I pulled the tablet back. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I needed to breathe. I sat on the edge of the tub and read the article. Every word felt like a punch to the gut. Gideon Hartwell, founder and CEO of Hartwell Financial, net worth estimated at $4 billion. Disappeared 2 years ago following a business summit in Chicago. Police suspected foul play, but no body was ever found. His son, Derek Hartwell, has since taken over the company, though rumors of internal strife continue to plague the board. Chicago. That was 400 miles away. How did a billionaire from Chicago end up freezing to death on a bench in Ohio? The article mentioned a helpline. If you have any information regarding Gideon Hartwell, please contact the Hartwell Family Trust hotline immediately. A reward of $500,000 is offered for information leading to his recovery. $500,000. That amount of money could change everything. It could buy a house. It could pay off my debts. It could secure Mr. Wallace's care for the rest of his life. My thumb hovered over the phone icon. I could call right now. I could end the struggle. I could be the hero who found the lost tycoon. But then I stopped. I thought about the night I found him. He had no wallet, no phone, no ID. His shoes were gone, his feet wrapped in plastic. He wasn't just lost. Someone had stripped him. Someone had dumped him. You do not lose a billionaire by accident. I looked at the part of the article about his son, Derek Hartwell. There was a photo of him too. He was handsome, polished, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The caption read, "Derek Hartwell expresses hope that his father is at peace, wherever he is." At peace, that was a phrase you used for the dead, not the missing. A cold chill ran down my spine. If Gideon Hartwell had enemies powerful enough to make him vanish, what would they do if they found out he was alive? What would they do if they found out he was living in a slum apartment with a waitress? If I called that hotline, who would answer? The police? Or the people who put him on that bench? I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back out. Mr. Wallace had gone back to his newspaper, humming a tune from an opera he could not name. He looked safe. He looked content. I realized with a terrifying clarity that I was the only thing standing between him and the sharks that had tried to eat him. I could not call the hotline. I could not trust the police, who had dismissed him as a junkie 2 years ago. I could not trust the son who spoke of him in the past tense. I sat down at the table and opened a new browser window. I typed in Hartwell family tree. I needed to know who else was there. I needed to find a weak link, a safe harbor. I scrolled past Derek Hartwell. I found a mention of a granddaughter, Clara Hartwell, age 24, an artist. There was a photo of her at a charity gala, looking uncomfortable and out of place, standing far away from Derek. I bit my lip. "I am not going to call the hotline," I said to the empty room. "Mr. Wallace looked up. "Did you say something? Mia?" "No," I said, forcing a smile. "Just talking to myself." I looked at the tablet one last time, memorizing the face of the man who was worth $4 billion, and then I looked at the man who had taught me how to make a budget stew last night. I was going to find out the truth, but I was going to do it my way. I was not going to hand him over to be erased again. If Mr. Wallace was indeed Gideon Hartwell, then someone had tried to kill him, and if I was not careful, they would kill us both. I closed the browser tab. I grabbed a notepad and a pen. I wrote down the name Clara Hartwell. Tomorrow, I would call in sick to the warehouse. Tomorrow, I would start digging. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt true fear. Not the fear of poverty, but the fear of being hunted. The quiet days were over. The storm had just found us. Finding Clara Hartwell was not as difficult as finding her grandfather. She was an artist, a sculptor specifically, and she had a website showcasing her gallery exhibitions. I found a contact number for business inquiries listed at the bottom of a page dedicated to abstract metalwork. It was a long shot. Usually, these numbers went to agents or assistants, not the artist herself. I waited until 10 in the morning on Wednesday. I had called in sick to the warehouse, feigning a migraine that I did not actually have, though the stress was giving me a real one. Mr. Wallace was sitting on the balcony, watching the traffic below. He was wearing his best shirt, a plaid button-down I had found at a thrift store for $3. He did not know why I was tense, and I had not told him what I suspected. I did not want to break his heart if I was wrong. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. "Studio Hartwell." A woman's voice answered. She sounded weary, guarded. "I need to speak to Clara Hartwell," I said. My voice was steady, practiced. "Ms. Hartwell is not taking commissions right now," the voice said. "If you would like to leave a message." "It is not about a sculpture," I cut in. "It is about Gideon." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then, the tone of the voice shifted from professional to icy. "Listen, I do not know who you are, but if you are another psychic or a private investigator looking for a quick payout, I am hanging up. We have a legal team that handles harassment." "Do not hang up," I said quickly. "I am not a psychic. I am a caregiver. I have been looking after a man for 2 years. He has amnesia. He calls himself Mr. Wallace, but I think he is your grandfather. I have heard this 10 times this month. she snapped. "Everyone has a grandfather. Goodbye." "He has a scar," I blurted out. The line remained open. She did not hang up. "He has a scar," I repeated, talking fast. "On his left hip. It looks like a starburst. It is old, faded white, and he has a tremor in his right hand, but only when he is trying to hold something heavy. He hums opera when he reads the newspaper, specifically Madama Butterfly." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like 10 minutes. When Clara finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "My grandfather fell on a ski pole in 1982. She said softly, "That scar. It was never in the papers. The press never knew about it." I looked over at Mr. Wallace. He was humming quietly as he folded a napkin into a perfect square. "He also drinks his tea with his pinky out," I added, "and he hates the texture of velvet. He says it feels like dust." I could hear Clara breathing on the other end. It was a shaky, uneven sound. "Where are you?" she asked. "I am in Ohio," I said. "I want to bring him to you, but I have conditions." "I will send a plane," she said immediately. "I will send a private jet to the regional airport." "No," I said firmly. "No jets, no private security teams coming to my door. I do not trust anyone right now. Ms. Hartwell, I have read about the internal strife at your company. If he is who I think he is, someone wanted him gone. I am not handing him over to a driver." "Smart," she murmured. "You are smart. Okay, what do you want?" "I want to meet you at the estate," I said, "but I want an independent doctor present. One I choose, or one chosen by a third party, not the family doctor. And I want a lawyer present. If this is a trap, I need witnesses." "I will arrange it," she said. "Just, please, bring him home." The drive to the Hartwell estate took 6 hours. I had rented a car with the last of my savings, a nondescript gray sedan that blended in with traffic. Mr. Wallace sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window with mild interest. I had told him we were going on a trip to meet an old friend. He seemed content with that. He trusted me implicitly, which made the knot in my stomach tighten even further. We crossed state lines and entered a world I had only ever seen in magazines. The Hartwell estate was not just a house. It was a compound. Iron gates that looked like they belonged on a fortress blocked the driveway. A security guard stepped out of a booth as I approached. I rolled down the window. "Mia Kane," I said, "to see Clara." The guard checked a clipboard, his eyes scanning the interior of the car. He lingered on Mr. Wallace. His expression did not change, but he stiffened slightly. "Go ahead. Miss Kane, main entrance." The driveway was a mile long, winding through manicured lawns and ancient oak trees. The house itself was a sprawling mansion of stone and glass, imposing and cold. As we got closer, I saw a figure standing on the front steps. It was a young woman with dark hair, wrapped in a thick coat against the chill. I parked the car. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. "Are we here?" Mr. Wallace asked. "Yes," I said. "We are here." I got out and walked around to open his door. He stepped out, stretching his legs. He looked up at the house. I watched him closely. I was looking for a spark, a gasp, anything. He just stared at it. "Big house," he commented dryly. Clara came running down the steps. She stopped about 10 feet away. She was trembling. She looked at the man in the fraying thrift store cardigan, her eyes wide and wet. "Grandpa?" she whispered. Mr. Wallace looked at her. He tilted his head to the side, a gesture of polite confusion. "Hello, miss?" he said. Clara let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. She looked at me. It is him. My God, it is him. The eyes. I would know those eyes anywhere. "We need to be sure," I said, stepping between them. "Where is the doctor?" "Inside," she said, wiping her face. "Dr. Aris. He is from the university hospital. He has no ties to the family, and I have a notary here too." We walked inside. The foyer was cavernous, with marble floors that clicked under our shoes. A massive chandelier hung overhead, glittering like a diamond cloud. This was the moment. The test. Mr. Wallace walked in. He took 3 steps and stopped. He did not look at Clara. He did not look at the doctor waiting by the library door. He looked down at the floor. He frowned. "The 3rd tile," he muttered. I froze. "What?" I asked. Mr. Wallace pointed a shaking finger at a specific square of black marble near the base of the staircase. "The 3rd tile," he repeated, his voice gaining strength. "It was loose. I told Derek to fix it. I told him someone would trip." He looked up, his eyes scanning the grand staircase, tracing the banister up to the 2nd floor. "And the portrait," he said, pointing to a blank space on the wall. "Where is the portrait of Eleanor? Why is it gone?" Clara let out a choked sound. "We took it down," she said, her voice breaking. "We took it down for restoration after you left." Mr. Wallace turned to look at her. The polite confusion was fading, replaced by a dawning, terrifying recognition. He looked at her face, studying her features. "Clara?" he asked, his voice cracked. "You cut your hair." Clara ran to him then, burying her face in his shoulder. He stood there for a second, stiff and shocked, before his arms slowly came up to wrap around her. He patted her back, a rhythmic, soothing motion that looked like muscle memory taking over. I watched them, feeling like an intruder in my own story. The doctor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I still need to run the tests, to be legally certain." The doctor said gently, "A DNA swab. It will only take an hour to get a preliminary match if we have his profile on file." "We do," Clara said, pulling away but keeping hold of his hand. "We have everything." The next hour was a blur of medical swabs and tense waiting in the library. I sat in a leather armchair that cost more than my entire life's earnings. Mr. Wallace, Gideon, I had to start calling him Gideon, sat opposite me. He looked small in the massive chair, yet somehow, he fit. The surroundings did not dwarf him. They framed him. When the doctor returned, he was holding a tablet. He looked at Clara, then at me. "It is a match," he said, 99.9%. Gideon Hartwell. Clara exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. She slumped against the desk. I sat still. I did not feel relief. I felt a cold dread creeping up my neck. "He is not homeless," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the celebration. "He did not just wander off. Clara, I found him 400 miles away with no shoes and no wallet. He has a head injury that the doctors said was consistent with blunt force trauma." Clara looked at me, her eyes hardening. "I know," she said. "I suspected." "Then you know he is not safe here," I said. "He is safe with me," Clara insisted. "Is he?" I asked. "Who is running the company now? Who refused to fix the loose tile? Who benefits if he stays missing?" Clara went pale. "Derek," she whispered. "My uncle." "And where is Derek right now?" I asked. She looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. "He is on his way," she said. "I had to tell him. He is the executor of the estate. He got the alert from the gate security." I stood up. My instincts, honed by years of surviving on the streets of Ohio, were screaming at me. "Then we need to be ready," I said, "because the man who walked out of this house 2 years ago did not come back. The man sitting in that chair is a survivor. And if your uncle had anything to do with his disappearance, he is not coming here to welcome his father home. He is coming to finish the job." Gideon looked up at the mention of his son's name. His face darkened. The soft, confused Mr. Wallace vanishing for a fleeting second, replaced by something sharper, something dangerous. "Derek," he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He never did listen about that tile. I moved to stand beside his chair. I was just a waitress from Ohio, and he was a billionaire tycoon. But in that moment, looking at the grand doors of the library, waiting for them to open, I knew my role had not changed. I was still his guardian, and the wolves were at the door. The double doors of the library were thrown open with a force that rattled the glass in the cabinets. The man who strode in did not look like a son rushing to see a resurrected father. He looked like a CEO arriving to manage a catastrophic public relations crisis. Derek Hartwell was taller than Gideon, broader in the shoulders, and dressed in a suit that likely cost more than the building I lived in back in Ohio. He had the same jawline as his father, but where Gideon's face was currently soft with confusion and age, Derek's was hard, angular, and completely devoid of warmth. He stopped in the center of the room. He did not look at Clara. He did not look at me. His eyes locked onto the frail man sitting in the leather armchair. For a moment, I expected shock. I expected tears. Instead, Derek let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. "So," he said, his voice flat, "it is true." Gideon shrank back into the chair. It was a subtle movement, a pulling in of his shoulders. But I saw it. The man who had faced down muggers in my neighborhood with a quiet dignity was terrifyingly small in the presence of his own son. "Hello, Derek," Gideon whispered. Derek walked over. He did not hug him. He did not take his hand. He stood over him, blocking out the light from the chandelier. "Where have you been?" Derek asked. The tone was not curious. It was accusatory. I do not know," Gideon stammered, his hands trembling on the armrests. "I was with Mia." Derek turned slowly to face me. His eyes swept over my cheap boots, my worn jeans, and the messy bun of hair on my head. He looked at me as if I were a stain on the rug. "Mia," he repeated. I stood up. I refused to be intimidated by a man in a silk tie. "My name is Mia Kane. I am the one who found him." "And I suppose you are the one expecting a reward?" Derek said, a sneer curling his lip. "I am the one who kept him alive while you were busy redecorating his house," I shot back. Clara stepped forward. "Derek, stop it. She saved him. The DNA is a match. It is Grandpa. He is back." Derek ignored her. He pulled a phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. "I am taking over from here," he announced. "I have a medical team on standby. They will be here in 10 minutes. We need to assess his mental state. Clearly, he is unwell. He looks like a vagrant." "He is not a vagrant," I said, my voice rising. "He is your father, and he does not need a medical team he does not know. He needs rest." "You have done your job, Ms. Kane," Derek said dismissively. "You can go. I will have my assistant write you a check for your trouble. $5,000 should cover your expenses." $5,000. It was an insult. It was hush money. "I am not leaving," I said. Derek paused. He looked at me with genuine surprise, as if the furniture had suddenly started speaking. "Excuse me?" "He trusts me," I said, stepping closer to Gideon's chair. "I have been his caregiver for 2 years. He has amnesia. He gets confused and agitated with strangers. If you remove me now, you will cause him severe distress. I am staying until he is settled." Derek laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. "You have no legal standing here. This is my house. This is my father." "Actually," Clara interrupted, her voice shaking but determined, "it is Grandpa's house, and until a court declares him incompetent, he decides who stays." She looked at Gideon. "Grandpa, do you want Mia to stay?" Gideon looked up. His eyes darted between Derek and me. He looked terrified. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "She stays," Gideon said, his voice raspy but clear. "Mia stays." Derek's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his temple. He looked at his father's hand on my arm, and for a second, I saw pure, unadulterated hatred in his eyes. "Fine," Derek spat. "She stays the night, but tomorrow, the lawyers are coming, and we are going to get to the bottom of this little charade." The medical team Derek summoned arrived 20 minutes later. They were not warm. Family doctors. They were efficient, silent, and wore uniforms that looked more like military garb than scrubs. They moved Gideon to the east wing of the house, a section that had been set up like a high-end hospital ward. I was given a guest room on the opposite side of the mansion. It was luxurious, with silk sheets and a view of the gardens, but I knew what it really was. It was a holding cell. I did not sleep. I sat by the door, listening to the silence of the massive house. Around 2 in the morning, there was a light knock. I opened it to find Clara. She was holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I stepped back. She came in and poured the wine with a shaking hand. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me. "You need to know what you have walked into," she said. "Tell me," I said. "Derek has been busy," she began. "Since Grandpa disappeared. Derek took over as acting CEO. He has been systematically dismantling everything Grandpa built. He sold the technology division. He merged with a competitor that Grandpa hated. He has been liquidating assets to fund. Honestly, I do not know what. High-risk investments, gambling debts. It is a mess. But Gideon is back," I said. "He can stop it." "That is the problem," Clara said, taking a large gulp of wine. "If Grandpa is declared competent, Derek's power of attorney is void. The mergers he signed? They could be contested. The money he moved? He would have to answer for it. Derek could go to prison for embezzlement." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. "So Derek needs him to be incompetent," I said. Clara nodded grimly. "Or worse, Derek needs him to remain a figurehead, a vegetable, someone who is alive enough to keep the stock price stable but too sick to ask to see the books." I thought about the medical team Derek had brought in. I thought about the way they had barred me from entering the room, saying Gideon needed sedation for the shock. He is going to drug him, I realized. He is going to keep him in a fog so he never remembers what happened 2 years ago. Clara looked at the floor. I think Derek is the reason he disappeared in the first place. Mia, Grandpa was looking into the accounts right before he vanished. He told me he found something disturbed, and then, poof, gone. "We have to get him out of here," I said, standing up. "We cannot," Clara said. "The gates are locked. The security staff answers to Derek. If we try to take him, they will call the police and say you are kidnapping a senile old man. Derek has the legal paperwork. He has the power of attorney." "So we are prisoners," I said. "Guests," Clara corrected with a bitter smile. "Guests who are being watched very closely." The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted from tense to oppressive. When I tried to go to the East Wing to bring Gideon his breakfast, something I had done every day for 730 days, I was stopped by a large man in a suit standing outside the corridor. "Mr. Hartwell is resting," the guard said. "No visitors." "I am his caregiver," I said. "Not anymore," the guard replied. "Mr. Derek has hired specialists." I went to find Derek. He was in the library, sitting at Gideon's desk, signing papers. He did not look up when I entered. "Let me see him," I demanded. Derek finished signing a document, capped his expensive pen, and looked at me with a bored expression. "My father is undergoing a psychiatric evaluation," Derek said. "Your presence is a distraction. In fact, Dr. Evans suggests that your presence might be triggering his delusions. He thinks he is a poor man named Wallace when you are around. We need to break that association." "You are isolating him," I said. "You are trying to break his mind, not heal it." "Careful, Ms. Kane," Derek said softly. "Slander is a serious offense." He opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. "I am willing to increase my offer," he said. $50,000. That is a lot of money for a girl who washes dishes for a living. You could go back to Ohio, buy a nice car, maybe go to community college. Just sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear." I looked at the checkbook. $50,000. It was more money than I had ever seen. It was freedom. It was security. But then I remembered the way Gideon had looked at me the night before. "She stays." "I am not for sale, Derek," I said, "and neither is your father." Derek closed the checkbook. His eyes went cold. "Then you are going to regret this," he said. "You are a trespasser here. You have no resources, no allies. I can make your life very difficult. I can dig into your past. Did you pay your taxes on all those cash tips? Mia, did you claim my father as a dependent illegally? I can have you buried in legal fees so deep you will never see the sun again. Do your worst," I said, turning on my heel. I walked out of the library, my heart pounding. I knew he was not bluffing. I was out of my depth. I was fighting a billionaire on his home turf. I found Clara in the kitchen. She looked pale. "He locked the medical wing," she whispered. "Even I cannot get in." "We need to see him," I said. "I need to know what they are giving him." Clara hesitated, then pulled a small key from her pocket. "There is a service elevator," she said. "It goes from the laundry room to the linen closet in the east wing. The staff uses it. Derek might have forgotten to code it out." We waited until the house was quiet. It was the longest afternoon of my life. I paced my room, waiting for the signal. At 3 in the afternoon, during the shift change for the guards, Clara texted me, "Now." We crept down to the laundry room. The service elevator was old and creaky, but it worked. We rose silently to the second floor. When the doors opened, we were in a closet smelling of fresh sheets and antiseptic. I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. The guard was down the hall, getting coffee. I slipped out and ran to Gideon's door. It was unlocked. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn. Gideon was lying in the bed, an IV line running into his arm. "Gideon?" I whispered. He stirred. His eyes opened, but they were glossy and unfocused. He looked at me, struggling to swim through the haze of whatever they had pumped into him. "Mia?" he slurred. "I am here," I said, grabbing his hand. It was cold. They made me sign," he whispered. "What?" I asked, leaning closer. "What did you sign?" "Papers," he gasped. "Derek held my hand, made me write." I looked at the bedside table. There was a glass of water and a small paper cup with residue of white powder. "He is drugging you to make you compliant," I said, fury rising in my throat like bile. "Mia," he said, his voice gaining a sudden, desperate clarity. "The safe, in the study, behind the painting of the ship. The combination is your birthday." "My birthday?" I asked, confused. I remembered. He smiled weakly. "October 14th, 1014. There is a letter. I wrote it before I left, in case I did not come back." The door handle rattled. Someone was coming. "Go," Gideon whispered. "Run." I squeezed his hand one last time. "I promise," I said. "I am coming back for you." I dove into the adjoining bathroom just as the bedroom door opened. Through the crack, I saw Derek walk in, followed by a doctor. "Is he out?" Derek asked. "He should be," the doctor said. "The dosage was high enough to knock out a horse." "Good." Derek said, "The board meeting is tomorrow. I need him incapacitated until the vote is over. If he speaks, I lose everything." I held my breath. My hand clamped over my mouth. I had heard it, the confession, the motive. Derek walked over to the bed and looked down at his father. "Sleep tight, old man," Derek muttered. "You should have stayed dead." They left the room. I waited 5 minutes, then slipped back out to the service elevator where Clara was waiting. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely press the button. "They are killing him." "Clara," I said as the doors closed. "Slowly, they are erasing him." "Did you see him?" Clara asked. "Yes," I said, "and he gave me a weapon." I told her about the safe. "Tonight," I said, "we break into the study, we get that letter, and then we burn Derek Hartwell's empire to the ground." The game had changed. It was no longer about caregiving. It was a rescue mission, and I was done playing by their rules. The following morning, the illusion of hospitality at the Hartwell estate shattered completely. I was not asked to leave. I was escorted out. 2 security guards, men with necks as thick as tree trunks and earpieces buzzing with static, stood by my door at 6 in the morning. They gave me 10 minutes to pack. When I tried to protest, to demand to see Gideon one last time, they simply blocked my path with the impassive weight of hired muscle. I was deposited at the main gate like a bag of unwanted trash. My rental car was waiting, and as I watched the iron gates swing shut with a final, echoing clang. I realized that Derek Hartwell was not just a businessman, he was a tactician, and he had just successfully cut off my supply lines. I checked into a budget motel 3 miles down the road. It was a place where the carpet smelled of mildew and the neon sign outside flickered with a depressing irregularity. It was a far cry from the silk sheets of the guest room, but it was operational. I turned the small desk into a war room. I spread out my notebooks, the receipts I had saved for 2 years, and the timeline of Gideon's recovery. My phone buzzed. It was Clara. They changed the staff. The text read, "Dr. Evans is gone. There are 2 new nurses. They look like prison wardens. I cannot get into the East Wing." I typed back quickly, "Keep trying. We need to know what they are giving him. Take pictures if you can." The waiting was agonizing. For 2 years, I had known exactly where Mr. Wallace was every minute of the day. I knew if he was cold, if he was hungry, or if he was having a bad memory day. Now, he was behind stone walls, at the mercy of a son who had already wished him dead once. By noon, the second wave of Derek's attack hit. I was watching the local news on the small television mounted in the corner of the room. I expected a weather report. Instead, I saw my own face. It was a photo taken from a distance, likely by a telephoto lens earlier that morning as I was leaving the estate. I looked disheveled, angry, and defensive. The headline beneath it made my blood run cold. "Predatory caregiver removed from Hartwell Estate amidst allegations of elder abuse." I sat on the edge of the bed, my mouth dry. The reporter, a woman with perfect hair and a grave expression, was reading a statement released by the Hartwell Family Trust. "The family is relieved to have Mr. Gideon Hartwell home safely." She read, "However, concerns have been raised regarding the nature of his disappearance and the conduct of the individual who claimed to be caring for him. Sources close to the family allege that Mia Kane, a waitress with significant financial debts, may have knowingly kept Mr. Hartwell isolated to exploit his resources. The family is cooperating with authorities to investigate potential fraud and kidnapping charges." Kidnapping. Derek was not just discrediting me, he was framing me. He was rewriting the narrative so that if I tried to speak up, I would look like a criminal trying to save her own skin. He was using his power to turn the savior into the villain. My phone started ringing. It was not Clara. It was unknown numbers, reporters, maybe the police. I turned it off and removed the SIM card. I could not let them track me. I had to rely on the burner phone I had bought at a gas station on the way to the motel. The number known only to Clara. I looked at the notebooks spread out on the bed. These were my shield. November 3rd. One entry read, "Mr. Wallace remembered the smell of pine trees. He walked 2 miles today without shortness of breath. We made stew." January 12th. Another read. "He asked about a woman named Eleanor. He cried for an hour. I held his hand until he fell asleep." These were not the notes of a kidnapper. They were the records of a daughter in everything but blood. I organized them chronologically. I scanned every page into a cloud drive, creating backups of backups. If Derek wanted a war of information, I would be ready. That evening, Clara finally managed to sneak a call to me. Her voice was trembling so hard I could barely understand her. "Mia, it is bad," she whispered. I think she was hiding in a closet or a bathroom. The acoustics were tinny and echoed. "What is happening?" I asked, gripping the phone. I managed to get past the nurse for 2 minutes while she was on a break. Clara said, "Grandpa, he did not know me." "Is it the amnesia?" I asked. "No," Clara sobbed. "It is not like before. He is not confused. He is gone. His eyes are rolling back in his head. He is drooling. Mia, he cannot lift his head off the pillow. He looks like a zombie." "They are overdosing him," I said, a cold rage settling in my gut. "They are sedating him heavily to mimic advanced dementia. What medications are on the chart?" "There is no chart," Clara said. "The clipboard is empty, but I found a blister pack in the trash can. I took a picture. I am sending it now." My burner phone chimed. I opened the image. It was a blurry photo of a foil packet with the label partially visible. Haloperidol. I searched the drug name. It was a powerful antipsychotic, in high doses, especially for elderly patients with no history of psychosis. It could cause severe lethargy, confusion, and even permanent cognitive decline. It was a chemical lobotomy. "He is killing him," I whispered. "He is frying his brain so there is nothing left to testify." "There is more," Clara said. Her voice dropped to a terrified hush. "I heard Derek on the phone with the legal team. They are coming tomorrow at 10 in the morning." "For what?" "The signing," Clara said. "They are bringing a notary. Derek is invoking a clause in the company bylaws. If the founder is incapacitated, the next of kin can be granted immediate and total power of attorney over all assets, including the voting shares. If he signs that paper," I said, thinking fast, "Derek owns the company, he owns the estate, he owns Gideon. And once he has the signature," Clara added, the fear in her voice spiking, "he does not need Grandpa to be alive anymore. A sick, elderly man passing away in his sleep from complications of exposure would be a tragedy, but a neat one." The timeline had collapsed. We did not have days. We had hours. "Mia, what do I do?" Clara asked. "I am alone in here. Everyone is on Derek's payroll. Even the house staff is looking at me like I am the enemy." "You need to stay calm," I said, trying to inject a steadiness into my voice that I did not feel. "You are his granddaughter. You have a right to be there. Do not let them lock you out of that room tomorrow." "They will drag me out," Clara cried. "Then you make them drag you out," I snapped. "You scream. You break things. You make a scene so big that they cannot hide it. But tonight, you need to be invisible." I looked at the time. It was 8 in the evening. The signing was in 14 hours. "I cannot get back in," I said, pacing the small motel room. "The guards know my face. If I show up at the gate, they will arrest me for trespassing. And that fits perfectly into Derek's narrative." "We need legal leverage," Clara said, "but no lawyer will take our call. The news reports have made you radioactive." "We do not need a lawyer yet," I said. "We need the truth." I remembered the safe, the letter Gideon had told me about. The combination was my birthday, 1014. "Clara, listen to me," I said. "The letter in the safe. We have to get it. Tonight." "I cannot," Clara said. "The study is right next to Derek's bedroom. He has insomnia. He is up all night pacing. If I try to crack the safe, he will hear me." "Then we need a distraction," I said. "A distraction big enough to pull Derek and his guards away from the house." "What kind of distraction?" "Fire," I said grimly. Clara gasped. "Mia, are you crazy?" "Not the house," I clarified quickly. "The stables, the old barn at the edge of the property. Is it still empty?" "Yes," Clara said. "We use it for storage now. It is full of old hay and broken furniture." "If there is a fire at the edge of the estate," I explained, "the security protocols will mandate that the gates open for fire trucks. The guards will rush to the perimeter. Derek will have to go down there to manage the situation. The house will be chaotic." "And I can get into the study," Clara finished. "And I can get through the gates," I added. "It is arson." "Mia," Clara whispered, "that is a felony." "They are murdering your grandfather with antipsychotics." "Clara," I said, my voice hard, "they are stealing $4 billion and framing me for abuse. We are way past following the rules. We are fighting for his life." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the clock in the motel room ticking, counting down the seconds of Gideon's life. "Okay," Clara said finally. Her voice was steel. "I have a lighter." "Wait for my signal," I said. "I am going to buy some supplies." I hung up the phone. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror of the motel bathroom. I looked tired. I looked poor. I looked exactly like the desperate, dangerous woman Derek Hartwell had told the world I was. Good, I thought. If they want a villain, I will give them one. I grabbed my coat and headed out into the night. The air was cold, biting at my skin, reminding me of the night I found Mr. Wallace shivering at the bus stop. I had saved him once with a coat and a cup of coffee. Tonight, I was going to save him with fire and fury. The pieces were moving. The trap was set. Derek Hartwell thought he had won because he held the keys to the castle. He forgot that castles burn just as easily as shacks. I was coming back. And this time, I was not knocking on the door. I was kicking it down. The distraction had worked, but only just. The fire in the old barn had drawn the security detail to the perimeter like moths to a flame. Their radios screaming about containment and fire trucks. In that chaos, I had slipped through the service entrance, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I spent the remaining hours of darkness huddled in the back of Clara's walk-in closet, breathing in the scent of expensive perfume and terror. We had the letter. The safe had opened just as Gideon had promised, responding to the date of my birth. The contents were safe in my jacket pocket, burning a hole through the fabric. But the letter was a long-term weapon. It was for the courts. It was for the press. It would not stop what was happening in the library right now. At 10 in the morning, the house was silent again. The fire was out. The guards were back at their posts, and the lawyers had arrived. I checked my watch. 10:05. "It is time," I whispered to Clara. She looked pale, her hands shaking as she smoothed down her dress. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I said honestly, "but we have no other choice." We walked down the grand staircase together. I was not hiding anymore. I was walking straight into the lion's den, and I intended to make as much noise as possible. The library doors were closed. 2 guards stood outside. They saw us approaching, and their eyes widened. One of them reached for his radio. "Ms. Kane," the guard said, stepping forward to block my path. "You are not supposed to be on the premises. I have orders to—" I did not let him finish. I shoved past him with a strength born of pure adrenaline. I threw the double doors open so hard they banged against the inner walls with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. The scene inside was a tableau of corporate theft. Derek sat at the head of the large mahogany desk. 2 lawyers in pinstripe suits stood on either side of him. A notary public sat with her stamp ready, and in the center, slumped in a wheelchair that looked far too big for him, was Gideon. He looked terrible. His head was lolling to the side. His skin was the color of old parchment, and a line of drool escaped the corner of his mouth. He looked like a man who had already died but had forgotten to stop breathing. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice echoing off the high ceiling. Derek looked up. His expression shifted from annoyance to cold fury. "Security!" he barked. "Get her out of here!" I marched into the room, ignoring the lawyers who shrank back from my intensity. "You are drugging him," I shouted, pointing at Gideon. "Look at him! Derek! He cannot even hold his head up!" The guards grabbed my arms from behind, their grip bruising. I struggled, digging my heels into the Persian rug. "You are a criminal," Derek spat, standing up. "You are trespassing. You are trying to manipulate a mentally ill man for a payday. Get her out, now!" I looked at the notary, a middle-aged woman who looked terrified. "If you let him sign that, you are complicit in fraud," I yelled at her. "He is under the influence of heavy antipsychotics. He does not know where he is." One of the lawyers stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "Ms. Kane, these are serious accusations. Mr. Hartwell has been diagnosed by a professional." "By a payroll doctor!" I screamed, trashing against the guards. "Get her out!" Derek roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The guards dragged me backward. My boots skidded on the floor. I was losing. I was being removed. And once those doors closed, Derek would put a pen in Gideon's hand and guide it across the paper, and it would be over. "Grandpa!" Clara's voice cut through the noise. She had been standing in the doorway, paralyzed, but now she moved. She did not run to me. She ran to Gideon. She fell to her knees beside his wheelchair and grabbed his cold, limp hands. "Grandpa, look at me," she cried. "It is Clara. Do not sign it." Derek rounded the desk. "Clara, get away from him. You are hysterical." "He is not signing anything," Clara yelled, turning to face her uncle. "You are killing him. I saw the pills. Derek, I saw the haloperidol." Derek froze. The mention of the specific drug made the lawyers shift uncomfortably. "That is enough," Derek said. his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Remove her too. She is unwell." A third guard moved toward Clara. That was when Gideon moved. It was a small movement at first. His head lifted, fighting the immense weight of the chemical fog. His eyes, glassy and dilated, rolled frantically until they found Derek. "No," Gideon croaked. The room went silent. The guards paused, looking to Derek for instruction. Derek's face twitched. He leaned down, bringing his face inches from his father's. "Dad, you are confused," Derek said, his voice dripping with fake solicitude. "We are just trying to help you. The company needs you to sign. The employees need you. Just sign the paper, and you can go back to sleep." He tried to force a pen into Gideon's hand. He wrapped his own fingers around Gideon's, trying to physically manipulate the movement. "Sign it," Derek hissed, the mask slipping. "Sign the damn paper." Gideon's hand trembled. The pen hovered over the document that would transfer $4 billion and total control to his son. I stopped struggling against the guards. I held my breath. Gideon's knuckles turned white, with a sudden surge of strength that seemed to come from the very core of his soul. He ripped his hand away. The pen flew across the room and clattered against the marble fireplace. "I will not," Gideon rasped. Every word was a battle. Derek stared at the pen on the floor. Then he looked at his father with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. "He is incompetent," Derek shouted, spinning around to face the notary. "Look at him. He is violent. He is delusional. He is not fit to make decisions. I am invoking the emergency clause." "He is not incompetent," I yelled from the doorway. "He is fighting you." Derek pointed a shaking finger at me. "I want her arrested. I want her in jail." "I require a competency test," I shouted, using the legal term I had researched in the motel room at 3 a.m. The phrase hung in the air. I stared straight at the lead lawyer. "I demand an immediate, independent capacity assessment before any legal documents are signed. If you proceed without it, after I have publicly stated he is drugged, I will sue this firm for malpractice and I will go to the press with the toxicity reports." The lawyer looked at Derek. He looked at the notary, who was already packing her stamp into her bag. "Mr. Hartwell," the lawyer said, his voice tight, "we cannot proceed, not with a witness objection and a refusal from the principal." "What?" Derek screamed. "I pay you to handle this. Make him sign." "I cannot make him sign. Derek," the lawyer said, backing away, "and if Ms. Kane is right about the medication, we need to step back. This is too much exposure." The notary stood up. "I am leaving," she announced. "Do not call me again until this is resolved." Derek looked like he was going to explode. He swept the stack of papers off the desk, sending them fluttering to the floor like dying birds. "Everyone get out!" he screamed. The lawyers fled. The notary ran. The guards finally released me. Unsure of their legal standing in the midst of a family meltdown, I stumbled forward, my arms aching where they had held me. I walked over to Gideon. Clara was weeping, her head resting on his knee. Gideon was slumped back in the chair, the effort of refusal having drained the last of his energy, but his eyes were open. He looked at me. "Mia," he whispered. "I am here." "Gideon," I said, kneeling beside Clara, "I am not leaving." Derek stood panting in the center of the room. He looked at the three of us, the granddaughter he had betrayed, the father he had tried to erase, and the waitress he had underestimated. "This is not over," Derek said, his voice low and trembling with rage. "You think you won? You have nothing. I still control the accounts. I still control the house, and I will bury you." "You can try," I said, standing up to meet his gaze. I reached into my pocket and touched the edge of the letter, but the world is watching now. "Derek, and we are just getting started." Derek stormed out of the library, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Clara's soft crying and Gideon's labored breathing. "We did it," Clara whispered. "We stopped him." "For today," I said, looking at the door where Derek had vanished. But a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. He is going to come back, and he is going to come back hard. We need to get Gideon out of here, now. I looked at the old man who had once swept my floor with a piece of cardboard. He had fought a billion-dollar battle with one sentence. Now it was my turn to finish the war. Get the car. Clara, I said, we are leaving, and we are taking the truth with us. We drove for 3 hours without speaking, putting 150 miles between us and the iron gates of the Hartwell estate. Clara drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, while I sat in the back with Gideon. He was fading in and out of consciousness, the adrenaline of the confrontation wearing off and leaving him shivering and fragile. We did not go to a hospital. We could not. Derek would have alerts set up at every emergency room in the state within a 50-mile radius. Instead, Clara took us to a cabin in the woods, owned by a university friend who was currently researching in Peru. It was off the grid, dusty, and most importantly, it had no internet connection to ping our location. But isolation did not mean we were safe from the noise. That evening, I drove into the nearest town to buy burner phones and food. In the checkout line of the grocery store, I looked up at the television mounted above the cigarette counter. My heart stopped. My face was plastered across the screen. It was an old photo, one taken from my high school yearbook, making me look young and naive. The chyron beneath it read, "Manhunt continues for fugitive caregiver." But it was the interview playing that made me drop my basket. Sitting on a beige sofa, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, was my mother. My father sat next to her, looking grim and stoic. "Mia has always been troubled," my mother said to the reporter, her voice cracking with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "She cut us off years ago. She became obsessed with money. She would call us screaming that she deserved more. When we heard she had latched onto this poor billionaire, we were not surprised. She is a predator. We just want her to surrender before she hurts him." I stood frozen in the aisle, a jar of peanut butter in my hand. They had done it. Derek had found them. Or they had found Derek, and a transaction had been made. My family had sold me out to the highest bidder. They were painting me as an unstable, greedy monster to validate Derek's narrative. If I was the villain, Derek was the hero trying to save his father. I walked out of the store, leaving the groceries behind. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach where my heart used to be. There was no going back now. There was no bridge left to burn. When I got back to the cabin, Clara was pacing the floor. Gideon was asleep on the sofa. "We have a problem," Clara said. "I checked the news on my phone. Derek has filed an emergency injunction. He has frozen my accounts. He is claiming I am being manipulated by you. He is painting us as a cult. Mia, a 2-person cult that kidnapped a senile old man." I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket, the letter from the safe. "He can say whatever he wants," I said, placing the envelope on the wooden table. "But facts are stubborn things. We need a lawyer, not a family lawyer. We need a shark." Clara looked at the envelope. "Who?" "Elias Thorne," I said. Clara frowned. "The man who sued the pharmaceutical companies last year? He is expensive, and he hates my family." "Exactly," I said. "He hates the establishment, and right now, Derek is the establishment." We called Thorne at 3 a.m. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly and alert. I told him I had Gideon Hartwell. I told him I had a letter, and I told him I had proof of chemical restraint. "Bring him in," Thorne said. "The back entrance. 6 a.m. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Chicago. Thorne was a small man with eyes like flint. He sat at the head of the table, listening as I laid out the timeline. I placed the notebooks on the table, the daily logs of Gideon's recovery, the photos of the haloperidol, the receipts for the food I bought him when I was starving myself. Thorne flipped through the notebooks. "This is good," he muttered. "This establishes a baseline of care. It proves you were not hiding him for ransom. You were rehabilitating him." Then I slid the letter across the table. "This is what we found in the safe," I said. Thorne opened it. He read it in silence. His eyebrows shot up. He handed the letter to Clara. "Read the second paragraph." Clara read it aloud, her voice trembling. "If I am to disappear, or if I succumb to a sudden illness, do not look at my health. Look at the Cayman accounts. Look at the shell company registered under the name DH Holdings. Derek thinks I do not know. He thinks I have not seen the transfers. He is leveraging the company assets to cover losses in Macau. He is not just incompetent, he is a thief." The room went deadly silent. "This changes everything," Thorne said, leaning back. "This is not a custody battle anymore. This is a RICO case. This is corporate embezzlement and attempted murder to cover it up. But we need proof of the transactions." I said, "A letter is just an accusation." Thorne smiled, a predatory expression that made me glad he was on our side. "Ms. Kane," he said, "you brought me the map. My forensic accountants will find the treasure." For the next 48 hours, we lived in Thorne's office. We slept on sofas. We ate takeout. Gideon was examined by 2 independent specialists brought in by Thorne. They documented the traces of antipsychotics in his blood. They recorded his statement, which was becoming clearer by the hour as the drugs left his system. Meanwhile, Thorne's team went to war. They did not file a defense. They filed an offense. They submitted a dossier to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI. They attached the letter. They attached the preliminary findings of the forensic audit, which showed hundreds of millions of dollars being siphoned out of Hartwell Financial into offshore accounts controlled by Derek. Then, Thorne called a press conference. He did not put me on the podium. He did not put Clara on. He put the evidence on. I watched from the side of the room as Thorne stood before a sea of microphones. "The narrative you have been sold is a lie." Thorne boomed. "Mia Kane is not a kidnapper. She is a whistleblower. And Derek Hartwell is not a grieving son. He is a man who tried to erase his own father to cover up the theft of $400 million. The room exploded with flashbulbs. Thorne projected the image of the haloperidol blister pack on the screen behind him. He projected the toxicology report. "This is what they were feeding a man they claimed was senile," Thorne said. "This is chemical restraint. This is assault." Then came the final blow. Thorne played a video recording we had made that morning. It was Gideon. He was sitting in a chair, shaved, dressed in a suit Thorne had bought him. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. "My name is Gideon Hartwell," he said to the camera. "I am of sound mind, and I am here to tell you that my son left me to die." The effect was instantaneous. The news cycle, which had been spinning Derek's lies for days, ground to a halt and reversed direction. The predatory caregiver headline vanished, replaced by the Hartwell conspiracy. My phone, which I had turned back on, began to ping incessantly, but it was not hate mail anymore. It was requests for interviews. It was book deals. And then, the text came from my mother. "Mia, honey, we were confused. Derek's lawyers tricked us. We love you. Call us." I looked at the message. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of closure. I deleted the message and blocked the number. The fallout was swift. The FBI raided the Hartwell estate at dawn the next day. We watched it on the news from the safety of Thorne's office. We saw agents carrying out boxes of files. We saw the servers being confiscated. And then, we saw Derek. He was not wearing his expensive suit. He was wearing handcuffs. He was being led out of the front door, his head down, shielding his face from the cameras. The arrogance was gone. The power was gone. He looked small. Clara stood next to me, watching the screen. She reached out and took my hand. "It is over," she whispered. I looked at Gideon. He was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, watching the broadcast. He did not look triumphant. He looked sad, a father watching the destruction of his son. He turned to me. "Thank you, Mia," he said softly, "for saving my life, again." I walked over and knelt beside him. "We are not done yet." "Gideon," I said, "Derek is gone, but you have a company to fix, and I have a name to clear." Thorne walked in, looking pleased. "The judge just granted an emergency protective order." He announced, Derek is being held without bail. The flight risk is too high given the offshore accounts. And Gideon, the board of directors is calling. They want to reinstate you as chairman effective immediately. Gideon looked at his hands. I am old. Arthur, I am tired. You have Clara, I said, and you have a team. Gideon looked at me. And do I have you? I hesitated. My job was done. I had saved him. I had reunited him with his family. I should go back to Ohio. I should go back to my 3 jobs and my tiny apartment. But then I thought about the empty space where my family used to be. I thought about the text from my mother. I had nowhere to go back to. I am not going anywhere, I said, at least, not until you are back on your feet. The legal battle was far from over. There would be trials. There would be depositions. My parents would likely try to sue me for support now that they knew I was connected to a billionaire. But the fear was gone. I had walked through the fire. I had faced down a titan of industry, and I had won. That night, we returned to the estate. It was a crime scene now, taped off and swarming with agents. But it was also empty of Derek's presence. The air felt cleaner. I walked into the kitchen. It was messy from the raid. I found a kettle and filled it. I made 3 cups of tea. I carried them into the library. Gideon and Clara were sitting by the fireplace. The fire was crackling. I handed Gideon his cup. Thank you. Mia, he said, taking a sip. I watched him. He held the cup with his pinky finger extended. I smiled. Welcome home. Miss Wallace, I said. He smiled back. It is good to be here, he said. But please, call me Gideon. We sat in the silence, the 3 of us, survivors of a storm that had destroyed everything only to build something new in its place. I took a sip of my tea. It tasted like victory, but more than that, for the first time in my life, it tasted like belonging. The courtroom was a study in contrasts. On the left side, sitting behind a table stacked high with forensic accounting reports, was our team. There was Elias Thorne, looking like a shark smelling blood in the water. There was Clara, pale but resolute, holding her grandfather's hand. There was Gideon, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, his posture upright, the fog of the drugs completely gone. And then there was me, Mia Kane, the waitress from Ohio who had started this war with nothing but a bus ticket and a stubborn refusal to look away. On the right side sat Derek Hartwell. He looked diminished. The arrogance that had filled the library was gone, replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. His legal team, once a phalanx of high-priced intimidation, now looked like men trying to salvage their careers from a sinking ship. The Honorable Judge Vance presided. She was a woman with eyes that had seen every variation of human greed, and she did not look impressed by Derek. The hearing was technically about the conservatorship, but it had morphed into a coroner's inquest for Derek's career. Thorne did not waste time with emotional appeals. He went straight for the math. Your Honor, Thorne said, his voice booming without a microphone, we have submitted evidence showing that in the 24 months of Gideon Hartwell's absence, Derek Hartwell transferred exactly $412 million from the company reserves into shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. These transfers were not authorized by the board. They were not disclosed to shareholders. They were theft, plain and simple. Derek's lawyer stood up. Objection. These were strategic investments intended to diversify the portfolio. Investments? Thorne countered, holding up a document. We have the bank records. The money was used to pay off gambling debts in Macau and to purchase real estate solely in Derek Hartwell's name. That is not diversification. That is embezzlement. The judge looked at the documents. She adjusted her glasses. Her silence was louder than any gavel bang. Mr. Hartwell, Judge Vance said, looking at Derek, can you explain why you attempted to have your father declared incompetent the very morning he returned to the estate? Derek stood up. He smoothed his tie, but his hands were shaking. My father is unwell. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice tight. He has been living on the streets. He was under the influence of this woman, Ms. Kane. She is a manipulator. She isolated him. I was trying to protect the family legacy. Judge Vance turned to Gideon. Mr. "Hartwell," she said, "the court would like to hear from you." Gideon wheeled himself forward. He did not need the microphone. His voice, though raspier than it had been 2 years ago, carried the authority of a man who had built an empire from scratch. "I was not isolated, Your Honor," Gideon said. "I was saved. 2 years ago. I was attacked and left for dead. I lost my memory. I lost my identity. I was a ghost. The only person who saw me was Mia Kane." He turned and pointed at me. "She did not know who I was." Gideon continued. "She did not know I had money. She barely had enough money to feed herself. Yet she took me in. She gave me her bed. She worked 3 jobs to buy my medicine. She is not a manipulator, Your Honor. She is the only reason I'm sitting in this chair today. And as for my son..." Gideon looked at Derek. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, only a profound, crushing disappointment. "My son tried to drug me into silence," Gideon said. "He tried to turn me into a vegetable so he could keep stealing what he did not earn. I confirm here and now that I am of sound mind. I revoke Derek Hartwell's power of attorney effective immediately, and I request that the court strip him of all executive powers within Hartwell Financial." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Derek slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous," Derek shouted. "He is senile. She coached him." "Sit down, Mr. Hartwell," Judge Vance barked. She reviewed her notes for a moment, then looked up. The verdict was swift and brutal. Based on the overwhelming evidence of financial malfeasance and the toxicology reports indicating forced sedation, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Judge Vance announced, "All transactions executed by Derek Hartwell in the last 2 years are hereby frozen pending a federal investigation. Temporary guardianship of the estate and medical decisions is granted to Clara Hartwell until Gideon Hartwell is fully medically cleared, and Mr. Derek Hartwell." She looked at the bailiff. "You are to be remanded into custody immediately. The flight risk presented by your offshore assets is too great. Bail is denied." Derek's face went white. 2 officers moved in. They did not ask him to stand politely. They pulled him up. The click of handcuffs echoed through the room. "You cannot do this," Derek screamed as they dragged him toward the side door. "I am a Hartwell. I built this company. Dad, tell them to stop." Gideon did not look back. He kept his eyes fixed forward, watching the symbol of justice on the wall behind the judge. He had made his choice. As the courtroom cleared, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Thorne. "Good work, Mia," he said. "You just took down a giant." We walked out into the hallway. The press was there, a wall of cameras and microphones, but I barely saw them. My eyes were locked on 3 people standing near the exit: my mother, my father, and Kyle. They were dressed in their Sunday best. My mother was holding a bouquet of cheap flowers. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile that looked like it had been painted on with grease. "Mia!" she cried out, pushing past a reporter. "Mia, baby, over here!" The audacity was breathtaking. After going on national television and calling me a predator, after siding with Derek, after 3 decades of treating me like an ATM, they were here. They had seen the news. They knew I had won. They knew I was standing next to a billionaire who owed me his life. I stopped. Gideon and Clara stopped beside me. "Mia, honey," my father said, stepping forward with his arms open. "We were so worried. We were just trying to protect you. That man Derek, he lied to us." "He is a monster," my mother added, nodding vigorously. "But we knew you would do the right thing. We are so proud of you." Kyle was smiling, looking at Gideon's expensive suit with hungry eyes. "Hey, sis, long time no see." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me, and for the first time, I saw them clearly. They were not my family. They were parasites. They moved from host to host, draining whatever they could until nothing was left. I did not yell. I did not cry. I felt a calm, cold certainty wash over me. "Stop," I said. My father froze. "What?" "Do not come any closer," I said. My voice was low, steady, and loud enough for the reporters nearby to hear. Mia, do not be like that, my mother pleaded, tears instantly forming in her eyes. We are family. No, I said, we share DNA. That is biology, not family. Family is the people who show up when you have nothing. Family is the people who do not sell you out to a criminal for 5 minutes of fame. I turned to Thorne. Mr. Thorne, I said, does the restraining order cover harassment in public spaces? Thorne smiled, stepping between me and my parents. It certainly does, Ms. Kane, Thorne said, and I would be happy to have the officers enforce it right now if these individuals do not vacate the premises. My father's face turned red. You ungrateful brat! After everything we did for you! You did nothing, I snapped, my composure cracking just for a second. You took everything. You took my money. You took my self-esteem. You took years of my life. But you are not taking today. I looked at Gideon. Let's go, I said. We walked past them. My mother was wailing now, screaming about how I was abandoning them. But her voice faded into the background noise of the city. I did not look back. I stepped out into the sunlight of Chicago, and the air tasted like oxygen, pure and clean. 2 weeks later, I stood on the terrace of the Hartwell estate. The snow was melting, revealing the green shoots of spring. The house was quiet. Derek was in a federal holding cell, awaiting trial for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. The board had reinstated Gideon, but he had largely handed the reins over to Clara, who was proving to be a formidable leader in her own right. I was packing my bag. I had stayed to help with the transition, but it was time to go. I did not know where, exactly. Maybe back to school, maybe travel. For the first time, I had options. Mia? I turned around. Gideon was navigating his wheelchair onto the terrace. He looked healthy. The color was back in his cheeks, and his eyes were sharp. You are leaving? He asked. I think it is time, I said. You are safe. Clara is in charge. My work here is done. Gideon wheeled closer. He held out a thick blue folder. Not quite, he said. What is this? I asked. I had my lawyers draw it up. Gideon said, I told you. Mia, I pay my debts, and I owe you a life. I opened the folder. The first document was a deed to a house, not a mansion, but a beautiful, historic home in the quietest part of town, fully paid for. The second document was a bank statement, an account in my name. The balance was $5 million. Gideon, I whispered, I cannot take this. You can, and you will, he said firmly. But that is not the important part. Look at the last page. I turned to the back. It was a charter for a nonprofit organization, the Mia Kane Initiative. I am endowing it with $50 million, Gideon said. Its sole purpose is to provide legal aid, housing, and medical care to the homeless. No questions asked, no bureaucracy, just help, and I want you to run it. I stared at the paper. I thought about the night I found him at the bus stop. I thought about how many others were out there, invisible, freezing, waiting for someone to stop and look at them. You want me to be the CEO? I asked. I want you to be the conscience, Gideon said. You saw me when the world looked right through me. I want you to do that for others. I looked out at the vast estate. I thought about my 3 jobs. I thought about the ramen noodles. I thought about the fear that had been my constant companion for 33 years. It was gone. I looked at Gideon, the man I had saved, the man who had saved me back. I will do it, I said, on one condition. Name it. We keep the soup Sundays, I said. Every Sunday, we make soup, just us. Gideon smiled, and it was the smile of Mr. Wallace, warm and familiar. Deal, he said. I took the folder. I took my freedom. I took my future. The revenge was sweet. Seeing Derek behind bars and my parents cut off. But this was better. This was justice. And as I looked at the sun setting over the horizon, I knew that for Mia Kane, the story was not ending. It was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment down below with your city or country so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and redemption, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to see the good guys win.